Well, hey guys, today on the video we're going to be talking about how to set up your bareback rigging from start to finish. Okay, so these are some things you're going to need. Getting over here, first, you're going to need your bareback rigging. I got an old one, but still, same principles apply when you're setting up rigging. What else you're going to need is you're going to need 4 about 1-inch deck screws, or not deck screws, excuse me, 1-inch just screws. You're going to need a 2.5 to a 3-inch deck screw. You're going to need a box cutter, hammer, a file. You can use or even a horseshoeing rasp. Also, you might need, what I don't have in the video, is like a sander or a Dremel. Dremels are key. I just don't have one. A piece of leather. Right here, you're going to need a 7/16 nut driver. You're going to need some self-tapping screws, about 1 inch or 3/4 of an inch, with a little cover there. And you're going to need your nut pad. You're going to need some polyurethane, and I just got some clear gloss. You're going to need some contact cement. You can also use barge or whatever, just quick drying glue. All-purpose glue. You're gonna need either like a dog collar or some sort of strap. And then I said you're gonna need some sandpaper. I got some coarse sandpaper and some finer sandpaper. Then you're gonna need some epoxy. So I've got water weld and you got quick steel. I'm gonna use the water weld today just because it sets up in 25 minutes, so I got a little bit more time to work it. And also, if you're a beginner and you're starting to set up your rigging, this would probably be a good one to use, just so that you can really get the block set up how you want. But once you figure out how to set up your block quick, go over here to the quick steel, and it only sets up in 5 minutes. Then you're also going to need a C-clamp, but this is going to be kind of optional, but this is good to have if you got it. Then you're going to need a drill with some bits, and then finally you're going to need your rigging pad and your Latigos. Okay, let's get started. Alright guys, so the first thing I want to do when I get my new rigging is I want to mess with the handle. So when you first get your handle, everything's going to be really sharp, really clean, really crisp, sharp edges. So what I want to do is I want to customize this handle to however I want it. There's only a couple of spots that you don't want to touch, but for the most part you can kind of run wild with it. So one of the things you don't want to touch is this offside edge, because that's what's going to create your bind. So you want to leave that one a little sharp, but this inside, wherever your hand's going to be going in, this you can kind of round over and make it a little bit more curved so it's not so sharp, so it doesn't bite into your hand. Another thing I like to do when I get my rigging is like this little 90-degree turn here. It can be pretty sharp, and you got to think your boys are going to be riding right on top of that. So what I like to do is I like to round that down, and also I like to, this top spot here can be kind of sharp, and I'll round that over as well. So if you got a Dremel, you can just Dremel that down. It takes a couple seconds. Same thing here. Or if you got a sander or a file or a rasp, it'll all do the same thing. And also sometimes in here, some guys will kind of round that so that you can get a little bit more lift, is what they think, or just a little bit more comfortable on the hand. And sometimes people will come down and grind this out as well. It's all personal preference. So what I think a guy gonna do just for the basic, getting it set up, is round this bottom top knot of your handle here, and also file this top here, and then kind of grind the inside. So I just got done sanding this deal. I'm gonna try to show you. I kind of took the edge off right here on the rigging, going up and down. I sanded this down. It had some cracks and it was kind of uneven, so I evened that out. I filed up in here, and you can see that this is kind of rounded. I'm trying to give you some different angles. but this can usually be pretty sharp, and I rounded that off. I sand down the handle, get that flat and smooth, and then also did right here, I rounded this off. And just try to make anything that's super sharp, just try to take it down so when you go to double grab, you don't cut your hand. Yeah, so what I'm gonna do next is just kind of finish up with some light sandpaper, clean it up, and then I'm gonna polyurethane it, and it's gonna look like a whole new handle. With this, don't be worried if it gets on your body or anything, and what that could be a positive is that it kind of waterproofs your body a little bit if you are out in the rain or something. But just what you wanna do is just lightly mist it, and you don't want it dripping off because it's going to take forever to dry, and when it finally dries, it's never going to cure hard enough, and it's going to come off and peel off once you run your hand in. So what you want to do is let that truck go by. What you want to do is just light layers. So you're just going to kind of mist it on there until you can see that it's covering it. And make sure you're in a good ventilated area. My garage door's open, and you just kind of slowly go back and forth, try to get every angle of that rigging handle. Let's see if, I don't know if I'm getting this on camera for you guys. I'm just kind of going back and forth. And this just helps seal it up. And say if you want to go back after you set this up, you're like, you know what, I want to take a little bit more off the top. It's biting me here, I want to take a little bit more off there. Come back, grind it with the Dremel, sander, file, whatever, and then sand it up, polyurethane it, seal it up, you're back to rocking and rolling. So once you've got a good healthy layer on there, just let it sit for about 5-10 minutes, come back, do another layer. And I like to do anywhere between 3 to 5 layers. Let it dry really good, and then once that's done, we can start with the next step. So we just got our handle all polyurethane. This old rigging looks almost brand new after putting them 3 coats on there. Looks pretty good. Now the next thing what I do with my riggings, guys, is right here on the handle, I take that 3-inch deck screw and I drive it in and I connect it to the body, because sometimes a bucking horse will flip out in the chute and will hit the top of the handle, and if they hit it hard enough, they're going to mess up your whole rigging. But sometimes it can push forward and it can create space in between the handle and your body and your rigging handle. So this screw is just going to help connect the two. And say you have a rigging that's got both bars under, you're just going to put 2 deck screws in. So what I do is I try to line up where the body comes over and comes down and link it up, and I draw a line right here, and then usually from this angle you can see pretty good, something like that. And I'm just going to take my bit at an angle and drill in, and the bit I'm going to use is just slightly smaller than the screw, if you can see that. So I'm going to stick that in, I'm going to drill this hole. And also, guys, don't be scared, because you want it to go into the rawhide piece in the middle of that plastic piece, and if you're off by a little bit, it's okay. And say you have the screw come out of the rigging body, which has happened, you can either, one, wherever it comes out is sand that, or cut off the point of the screw and sand it down where it doesn't touch anything, or you can pull it out, get a different angle, and go back in. So with that, I'm going to see if I can do this all on camera. Let's see, try to find about the middle of the rawhide. Start up and down straight so you can at least get started. Once you get started, find your angle to that piece of rawhide. All right, got that done. And then what I like to do, so I can get the head of that screw to sink a little deeper, is take a little bit bigger bit and put this screwdriver, put the deal in reverse so you don't just sink into it. And something kind of like that. I think you can see that. Take your deck screw, get it started. And there you go. And you could see big time when I did that, that rigging handle really sucked to the body. So that is what that looks like. And if this screw's sticking out a little bit, where you think when you double grab it's going to bite on you, a guy can either take some of that epoxy and go under it, or take a sander and just sand it down till it's flush. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to be putting in the block on our rigging. And I've been getting a lot of questions from guys about how to do this. So what you're going to need is you're going to need those 4 1-inch screws, a drill, and what I did is I laid out my holes, not my holes, but I put Sharpie marks where I'm going to put the screws. And the thing with the screws is you don't want to go all the way through the rigging. You want to go all the way until that screw hits that hard piece of plastic there and goes about halfway in. You don't want the screws to go all the way through. But so like here, I'm going to put a screw here, 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 and here. And how I line it up, guys, is I look down the rigging right there, and I'm looking down. If you're right-handed, I'm looking down this left side. You can see I got the one here, 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 and here. This isn't a Sharpie mark, but anyway, so I got the 4 screw marks there, and that what the purpose of these is going to be is that I'm going to use that for the block to hang on to, because if you put that epoxy just straight on leather, it'll hold for a couple rides, but one good jar or one good yank and that epoxy will break loose from the leather, and then you have nothing holding you to your rigging handle and keeping your glove tight with that bind, and that'll break out and you have a good chance of getting backdoored or kicked in the head or much worse. So these screws are going to just kind of help hold the epoxy to your rigging. So I got my screws in there, and as you can see, they're super tall, and that's way taller than what we need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some cutters, and I want to cut them to be about anywhere from, I think, 1/4 inch to 3/8, like not very tall. I just want them tall enough where the epoxy will grab onto them. So these screws, I just cut the heads off of them, and you can see how kind of tall they are. This back one's sticking up a little more. There's a reason for that, because that epoxy, the way it comes down, is that it's going to kind of angle up a little bit and then drop off. So I just want a little bit more room for that screw to hit. But now you can see how they're lined up and how that epoxy can get in there, and it'll hold it to the body of your rigging. Okay, so now I've got this JB water weld. You take it out of the deal, and it's got like this little tabs on each end. Take those off, and then it's got this plastic wrap. So unwrap that, and you can see when you look at it from the one end that there is like a curing agent. I don't know if you can see that good enough. Yep, right there. And then you got like the epoxy, and then you got the cure in there that hardens it. And when you get this stuff, guys, really look at it, because sometimes it'll be hard already on some ends, and you need to take that off because it's no good. And if you get a whole thing that's really hard, take it back and get your money back and get one that's soft, because I've had that, and it's not going to do any good as anything for your block. So take off the hard pieces, and then you need to start breaking it and kneading it and trying to get it. You can see how it's different colors. You want it to where it's all the same color. So I'll just kind of, almost like playing with Play-Doh. And if it starts to get really tacky and sticky, it's going to be weird, but you just got to spit on it. And it'll kind of help loosen it up a little bit more and give it a little bit more life. It makes it a little bit easier to roll around. So really, just go until it's all the same color. And then when it's all the same color, that's when we stick it on our rigging. And usually about 1 stick will work. Sometimes you might need a little less, sometimes you might need a little more, it just all depends. And same thing with the quick steel. The only reason I'm using this is because it takes a while to set up, so it gives me more time to show you guys on camera. But if you're doing this and you've done a few of them, just use the quick steel and it'll be set up within 5-10 minutes and you're ready to rock and roll. And I've had people ask me like, hey, how long does it take for it to set up and how long can you ride? Can you ride with it? Like say you show up to a rodeo and you figure out your blocks broke, just take out some quick steel, build yourself a new shelf, new block, and let it set up, and within 45 minutes to an hour it should be ready to ride. Alright, so I got it all the same color. Now what I want to do is get it to about the width of my palm is kind of how wide I want it. And what you want to do is you want to stick this whole thing on top of those screws. So I'm going to try to move the camera quick so that you guys can see this. Just 1 second. Alright, so now we got this. I'm going to fold it one more time. So I'm going to get it about like that, okay? And this stuff's pretty tacky, so like I said, spit on it will help. And what you do is you got your rigging here, stick this sucker on there, and put it on them screws. Now you're going to slowly start to build your shelf. And what I like to do is line up that rigging edge with the edge of my epoxy and start pushing it down. Spreading it out. You can see how it's starting to kind of bubble up down here, kind of push it flat. And this is where also a rasp is going to come in handy. Kind of push this edge down. And see how I'm starting to kind of form up that block where your tits, that ledge where your tit's gonna sit. And another thing to think about too, guys, when you're doing this, is this angle of this handle here. You can look at how it's kind of going down like this. That's how you want your block to be going down as well. And if it starts to go down on one side, push it up. You see we're covering all them screws. Now I kind of got the basic shape of it. And you can see where there's low and high spots. Just push them out with your thumb and your thumbs. And you see how there's kind of this angle of your block is kind of going with that with your rigging. And you can also see how it starts to kind of come up in the back too. I'm trying to show that as many angles as I can for you guys. So I got it kind of close. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my rasp and flatten it out and kind of get in on some of them edges that I struggle with. So just kind of pushing it down like this. And then this can also help you with your angle and getting stuff flat. And with the epoxy, guys, you almost want more than you want less, because you can always file it down, but if you don't have enough, then you're trying to add back on. It's almost impossible. It's like trying to put old piece of concrete and put new concrete on top. You can't. You just got to rip out the old and put in a whole new deal. So that, push down. And also you don't want any of them the screws coming through the epoxy, because if that hits your hand, you're kind of screwed and it's going to hurt like hell. So another thing, like I should have said at the beginning of this video, guys, if you find something that you like better for your block or you like better for your rigging setup, do that. This is just the way I've done it. So always be a student, and you can always learn from anybody going down the road. So like what I do, I just keep filing it out, trying to get it as best I can. Just try to make it flat, because the whole purpose of putting a block in your rigging, I don't know if anyone's ever told you guys this, but you're trying to create enough space so when you run your hand in, where when you crack your hand back, these knuckles going down here are hitting that block where it doesn't allow your hand to roll over. So when it hits that block, it stops them right there. And so then you got a bind and a bubble on the palm of your hand that's also locking you in, and you got the tit that's holding you in. Some guys have a knuckle lock and a top tit too, so that when that horse gives you a jerk or a pull, your hand don't rotate out. That block blocks your hand from rotating. That's the whole purpose of it. So like here, see if that's the angle I can show you guys. Like that. Coming up. That's how it's going to look from this side. And see how it's kind of going the same angle as this handle here. Now you just kind of let it dry and set up, and I'll show you what to do next. So I just got some thin leather. It's thin. I don't know if it'd probably maybe be 1 or 2 ounce leather. But what I do is I cut like a little 90-degree deal in there, slide it in. So that's going to cover your tit ledge, your back tit, and it's also going to cover your block. So then I slide that leather up, make sure it's pretty tight, going down the angle I want. Have your pin handy so that you can kind of draw where you need to cut. So you can see how I think that'll show up. You can cut like that. And one thing I didn't tell you guys that you might need a cutting board that you can get dirty, and some scissors. It'll make it go by a little faster. You can get by with a box cutter, but sometimes scissors make it just a little handier. And the whole purpose of this is to cover your block for one, and also give your glove to hit on for 2, and that helps kind of bite in, and 3, something to rub your rosin into. And you can also, I guess a 4th thing is, like I said earlier, you can change the thickness and tolerance of your block. So if you need to make it tighter or looser, you can always mess with it that way. So now, got a piece of leather that looks like this. Throw it in there again. Looks good on this side. Now I need to kind of fine tune it coming down. I'll get up here so you guys can see. So this side I would say is done. I like that. So this side you can see how it's kind of got that lip. I'll try to see if I can hold it where I want it. But you see how this is going to fold down. I'm going to push it in there. So I'm going to draw one more line, and then I'll show you how we glue that in. Now when you're gluing this, guys, this is key. You don't want to just gob it on there. If you gob it on there, it's going to take forever to dry. You're just going to be waiting around for it to dry. So what I say is put a thin layer on all the spots that is going to be touching leather. Just really thin, and do the same thing on the piece of leather that you're going to glue down. Let it kind of dry, and you want it to get tacky. Once it's tacky, then you can stick the 2 together. Alright, got that on. See how tacky this is? It's not too bad. And if it goes on a little wet, that's okay. And if you have some glue on the back side, it isn't going to hurt nothing. Get that in place. Start pushing it down gradually. Push that leather down with your thumb and kind of rub it, pushing it in, because how this contact cement works If it's wet, it's just going to stick together and it's going to slide all over. If it's tacky, well, it's going to kind of work like Velcro. You stick it together and then you hammer it down. I took my hammer or a screwdriver and kind of rubbed it down the block, and what that does is it pushes that leather and that glue closer and tighter together. So that's what I would do, is once you got your glue and it's tacky and it's almost dry, just lightly tap your leather to your block. You don't have to kill it, you don't have to hit it super hard. Rub it in, same thing going down the sides and on top of your block, just rubbing it in, and then let's see, tapping it all over. You don't want to break your block, you just want to tap that leather and glue down so that it's tight and kind of reinforces the block. So once I got the block in, I got the leather covering it, then what I like to do is I like to run my hand in the rigging. And so there's going to be one or two things that this is going to tell me. So I'm sitting here, run my hand in, crack it back like you would, see how it feels. Alright, so the first thing that it could be, guys, is that it's going to be too loose, and the second thing is it's going to be super duper tight. Now, the whole purpose of setting up a rigging is we're trying to find the perfect tolerance that this thing is going to be tight and comfortable, and it's not going to let us go. Because if it's tight and uncomfortable, you're going to be thinking about your hands swelling up and hurting, and you're not going to be thinking about your ride. And if it's super duper comfortable, and your hand goes in super easy, and it's a little loose, you're going to be thinking, wow, this is almost too good to be true, and the odds of you getting backdoored and kicked in the head are pretty high. It's no fun when that happens. So we're just trying to narrow down that tolerance of being tight, comfortable, and also going to hang on to us when we're in the middle of our ride. So let's say, for example, this thing is super tight. It hurts to run my hand in. It hurts to close my hand. Maybe I can't even close my hand. So there's going to be some things that we're going to do with that. So let's say, for example, it's too tight. What we're going to do is, one, we can rip the leather off, file down on our block if need be. If we have a super thick piece of cover leather, we can trade that out for a thinner piece of cover leather. Another thing we can do is we can add shims here. As you can see here in the back on this button part of the back of the handle, if you loosen them bolts up, you can create a gap right there, and you can put plastic shims in there, and I'll show you how to make those here soon, and it'll raise that up so you can get your hand in there. If, say, you have leather or tape in the front of your rigging handle, you can take that out to create more space, or if it's super duper tight front to back, then you have to Dremel out and sand and rasp some of the rawhide out so you can get enough space to get your glove in there. So those are some things you can do if the rigging is too tight to get your hand in. Okay, now if this thing is too loose when you run your hand in, what I'm going to say is, like, if you have shims in it, take the shims out. If there's no shims in it and you have no leather up front and it's still loose front to back, what a guy can do is put a piece of leather in the front. So you're going to change this spacing here, put a piece of leather, and then some guys will take some athletic tape and go around it until they get that perfect tolerance, what they're looking for. And then also, if it's too loose, you're going to have to either, one, rip your block out, get maybe 2 deals of epoxy, mix it together, and build that block way up, make it twice as big as I made this one, so you're trying to take up space going this way. And also, say if you don't want to go buy more epoxy and this block's still good, you can buy a bigger piece of leather and stick that on top of there and make that buffer, and then put the thin piece of leather over top, the big piece of leather over top of your block. So there's a couple different things a guy can do, and so it's all going to be off feel. I'm not there with you guys at home running, I'm not there in your body running my hand in your rigging to tell if it's right or wrong. It's going to be all off feel. So if you can't get your hand in, you're going to have to make some space. If you got too much space, you're gonna have to tighten it up, okay? All right, guys, so this is what a shim looks like. You can make them different ways. I like to make them where they can slide from the back of your rig into the front and go between the bolts there in the back. So if I can show you this, this is the back of your rigging right here. You're gonna wanna loosen these bolts. And so the reason why I only have 2 bolts here, because there's a hole for a third one. That third one is just really not really doing much, because 2 is just plenty to get you by. So I always take that third bolt out and have it as a spare in case one of these other bolts break. So I take that one out, and then I make this shim, and what it does is it just slides in between and goes underneath that handle, in between the handle and the body, and goes into there. As you can see there, it's going to slide in, and what that's going to add is just a little bit of space. So when I suck it down tight, now I got some space between there. Now if you make about anywhere between 7 and 10 of them, and then what you keep doing is you stick maybe a shim or 2 in, tighten these down, run your hand in, see how it feels. If it's still unbearably tight, loosen them, add some more shims. And if it's, say the opposite, if it's super duper loose and you got 5 or 6 shims in, take a couple of them out, tighten it down, run your hand in, check it that way. So make yourself a handful of shims, will get you by. And what I do to make shims is get yourself some thin plastic pieces you could use, gift cards, old credit cards, old gym membership swipe cards, even like your laundry detergent. I've seen guys cut out the empty laundry detergent bottle and cut shims out of that. And what all the guy needs to do is take these bolts out, slide the plastic piece in there, take a pen or Sharpie, trace it, and then mark through the top of these holes down to where your holes are going to be. And then you can either, you cut it out and you can either burn the holes in, and I've had guys do that where you can burn the holes in and put it in and then line them all up, and then you know the shims are never coming out. But if you need to add and take stuff out really quick, having this kind of forked design works pretty slick. So yep, if it's super tight and your tolerance from the bottom of your block to the top of your handle is really tight, you can't close your hand, add some shims in, will help you. Say if it's already super duper loose and you have shims, take the shims out until it tightens up. And a thing to think about, guys, is if you're going from, say, North Dakota riding and it's super cold, and then you go down to Texas where it's warmer, or a lot warmer than North Dakota, there's going to be a lot of change in humidity and temperature, which will cause your rigging to flex and change a little bit. So if you're traveling long distances, it's always good to check your gear when you get to the rodeo, because you might need to take a shim out or you might need to add a shim depending on what the weather's like, just so that either you have the chances of you can't close your hand, or the chances of your hand's going to come out even though it stayed in a couple states over. Now let's say that your rigging is too loose, right? So we're talking about the distance from the front of your rigging to the back of your tip block there on your rigging handle. What a guy can do is, if it is super duper loose, you're like, I need to make up like a good 1/4 inch, you can buy some saddle skirting leather. Like, this stuff is pretty thick, and all you do is shove the leather in there, trace out what it looks like, and then stick that in there, and you can see how it takes up that space. And what you do, let's see if you can see that, so it doesn't really poke out any more extra on the sides. Put that in there, and then take your glue, scuff up the leather like I showed you, and put some glue on your front of your handle, and then put some glue on the leather and push it together. Let it dry, hammer it together, and push it really tight like I was telling you what the glue does. And then what a guy does is you could take some athletic tape and just go from one side, fold it over, do it a couple layers on top and bottom, just to figure out that tolerance, what you need. And then if it's really not too bad, you just need to make up some space. You don't need a big extreme piece of leather. Just take either a small piece of leather and put in there, or take some athletic tape, stick it in there flat, fold over one side, then fold over the other, and work your way up and down until you get your desired thickness and tightness. So that is how you change your, so there's two different ways to tighten this up. You can either put leather in the front to tighten it front to back here, and you can either take shims out or add leather to your block, or buy more epoxy and build a bigger block to add the thickness this way. And then, like I said, if you want to make it looser, file your block down, take shims out, Dremel in the front of your rigging, and that's how you have to keep playing with that until you get your desired, what feels good to you. Some guys like to ride a really loose rigging. Some guys are like me. I like to ride a pretty tight rigging with a bubble on my palm piece. That's how I used to ride, and it's all personal preference. So what I would do to test it was I would tighten down my bolts. I'd get them snug. You take your nut driver, and I just go get them hand tight. Check them all. And that's always good to keep that 7 7/16 nut driver with you at all times. When you get to rodeo, just always check to make sure that they're hand tight. And then what I would do, run my hand in like you would, and then when you have Latigos on your rigging here, you'd run your feet through Latigos, and then you would crack your hand back, and then you'd act like you're deadlifting. You'd put your feet through the Latigos, and you'd pull on that rigging, and really try to, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get your hand out of the rigging by doing a deadlift and just seeing if something will fail. And if something feels like it's given, you might need to take your shim out. Or if it feels good and it didn't even budge, you're ready to get on a bucking horse, because it's not going to let you go. So that is what I do to add some stuff, and that's how I customize it to make it tighter or looser. So the next thing that you're going to need, guys, when you're setting up your rigging, let's just say that you got your handle, you got your block, you got your handle done, you got your block in, you got it to the tolerance that you like, that feels comfortable. You took that middle nut out of there, so you got that as a spare. Also I should say about taking that middle nut out, they have like a keeper on the bottom. Take that out, just take a flathead screwdriver, pry that out, and just screw it back together, so you got both those as a spare. Then what you're going to want to do is you want to have a nut pad to protect your boys when you're sliding up to your rigging. If you get off your rigging a little bit and you come slamming back down on it, this is going to protect everything in between your legs. So you can either buy a nut pad wherever you can buy your rodeo stuff, or you can make one. All you need is a piece of leather and some foam, and it's about 7 to 9 inches across the bottom and about 7 inches. You're just kind of making essentially a triangle. And what that's going to do is you got your rigging here, and you're just going to put the center of the triangle right there on that little nut deal, and then push it down like that. Pretty simple. And so what I do to get started is I got these self-tapping screws. They're about 1 inch to 3/4 inch, and it's got this nut head on it, and then you keep a washer on there so it doesn't go all the way through your nut pad, because then you have to start all over, make a new nut pad, or buy another one. So I'll find where I want it to sit, and then I'll see where these self-tappers are going to touch my rigging body, and then I will make a mark with a pin so that I know where I want the tip of the self-tapper to hit. So at least I know I'm lined up. Since I know that, then you take your drill, your nut driver, kind of drive it through your pad, get it flush. And you can also use flathead or Phillips or hex head self-tappers, whatever you can get your hands on. And then start with the one side, get lined up, firm pressure, gets tight. And this side, push it around, get as tight as you want. There we go. Takes a little bit, but then it's nice and tight. Got some padding there. It's not going to catch on your shaps. So this next thing that I'm going to tell you about, guys, is kind of optional. You don't have to do it. Some guys do it. They do it in different ways. And what they're doing is they take like a dog collar or a piece of strapping of some sort, and they stick it across the front of their rigging body. And what they're doing is they're trying to keep this peak here of the rigging body at the same angle for longer, right? Because as you stretch this out, it goes back together in your rigging bag, stretch it out on a horse, goes back in your rigging bag, it starts to break this down, your peak, and it starts to slowly change levels, which can affect your riding and can affect your lift. That's why a lot of guys will update riggings, say after every 100 horses or even after every 50 horses. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to make their rigging last as long as possible. And so it's all personal preference, like I said. So one way, if you're going to do it, take a C-clamp that'll fit across here. I'm not going to show you how to do it because you have to kind of wrestle it. But where you stick the C-clamp on is kind of right there on both sides, and you try to squeeze it together here because you can see that rawhide in the middle. And you also sometimes they'll have it on top, but you're trying to push it together and get it as tight, not as tight as you can, but get it to where it's a little tighter than it is now, or leaving it, like say you get a brand new rigging, you don't need the C-clamp, just stick a piece of strap across the front, and then it'll hold your peak of your body a little bit longer. Is it a necessity? No. Is it more of a mental game that guys are like, hey, this helps? I don't have the answer for that one. I think I did it. I think it was more of a mental thing that it just made me think that it lasts longer. These things are pretty dang tough. And I've ridden a rigging for over 150 horses, and it was just fine. So if you're a new guy and you got an old rigging, you know, taking a C-clamp, pushing it together, kind of raising that peak up could help an old rigging, but for a new rigging you really don't need a strap. But say you're gonna do it, say you got a new rigging, right? Take your hand nut driver, take off this first nut here on one side of the rigging, unscrew it all the way. Takes a second. It's got that washer. Take whatever dog collar or whatever, keep about like a 7 or 8 inch piece, drill a hole out of it on one side, make it big enough where the bolt will go through, stick it, screw it down on the one side. Then if you have a new rigging, just unscrew the other side, pull the strap across, stick the bolt through the strap, screw it back in, you're good to go on a new rigging. On an old rigging, now you would take the C-clamp, push it together, take this nut out. When it's together and tighter to where you want the peak to be, pull this over, find out where your hole is, push your hole through it, and then put the bolt through it and tighten the bolt down. And then unloosen your C-clamp, and you're good to go. Tighten it down. And like I said, guys, I know I've said it earlier, but when you're tightening these bolts down, if you use a ratchet, you can break these bolts. But if you use a hand tight nut driver, you're a strong guy if you can break them. But I always just get them hand tight, check them all, check them before every ride. Is a good rule of thumb, and you're good to go. So that's what that strap in the front looks like. So one thing, we're getting almost here to the end, and you see those bolts going through the back of your rigging handle. You see how long they are? Those can rub on your rigging pad and cause wear and tear on there and could eventually hit a horse. So what a guy does, when you got your rigging where you want it, you got your spacers where you want it, and what you're gonna need is some vice grips. And what you're going to do is you're going to get a hold of that sucker like so, get it to the tolerance on the vice grips, lock it down, and then you're going to start to pry it back and forth, and it's going to shear off right at the bottom of that nut. And then you do that to both sides. I'm not going to do it on the video because this isn't my rigging and I don't know what my buddy has planned with it. But when you got it, set your tolerance. I've always just take them vice grips, lock them down, wiggle it back and forth, start small, work to big wiggles, and eventually they'll just shear off. So we're getting to the end of our rigging setup. Final thing that we need to add to it is you need to have your rigging pad and your 2 Latigos. Okay, so pretty simple. You got your rigging pad. You're going to just stick your rigging over top, line up your 2 bars that go underneath your rigging, have them line up with the front of these. Pretty self-explanatory. And then, I already have tape on here already. You can either use athletic tape, hold your rigging down, do 3 to 5 wraps around there on each side, and then your rigging can either slide in and out. Also, another thing a guy can do is take elasticon. It's more expensive, but it lasts. It's pretty rugged stuff. Go around 2 or 3 laps around your rigging and your pad. That'll secure that. And then last thing you got to add is your Latigos. So there's 2 ways you can stick the Latigos on. You can see there's a rough side and a smooth side of your Latigo. So here's your rough side, and then here's your smooth side. The smooth side always wants to be facing you, because if you have this side, the rough side, when it bends, it can cause it to crack a little bit faster. It'll still work, but it's always good to have the smooth side towards you against your D-ring. And so what I always did, have your rigging flat here, take your smooth side, have it facing towards you, take your lip, flip it over, and then there's a way a guy can tie this down, and I'll change the camera angle so you can see it. So how I did this is I would take your leather thong here and I'd fold it in half, find the center of it, and I'd go around the back like so, and then put the 2 pieces together, the 2 ends together, and find the pointy ends of them. And what's also, you're going to need a tool. Grab some needle nose pliers or something to grab onto these deals, but run those through the back side here. I'll come through the middle and then stick it through the other side at the top hole. And then you can suck it tight. So you got that there, it goes all the way around, comes through, and then I did the same thing, go around again, find your 2 points, push them together, and then you're gonna find that first back bottom hole, stick them through. Like I said, if you got some pliers, it always makes life a little simpler. And then get ready to go through this top hole, push them together, pull them through. Now it goes around it twice through both holes. Then what I would do is just take your athletic tape and go around that on the way down, and then that would be done. And you do the same to the other side. Okay, one final thing before I finish up this video, you guys. You got a brand new rigging here. You got it all set up how you want. Now you need to break it in. You need to stretch it. There's going to be different ways that guys stretch their riggings. Some guys will go stick their rigging on a bucket machine, stretch it down tight, let it sit for 15-20 minutes, ride the bucket machine with it, and do that 5 to 10 times, you know, throughout the week. Or some guys will stick the rigging on a fence or on a truck grill guard, tie their Latigos to one side, tie the Latigo to the other, and stretch it out tight, really trying to open that body up so that when it gets on a horse, it's not going to pinch or hurt the horse or make it unbearable or even impossible to pull down. And then another thing, you could also put it on your spur board to help stretch it. And when I cracked out, before I got on a bucking horse with a new rigging, guys, what I would always do as a rule of thumb is I would stretch it. I'd also get on the bucking machine and I would test it out to build my confidence in my piece of equipment. Run my hand in, crack it back, put the bucking machine on a low setting. Okay, held me in, it felt good. Hand didn't slip or creep like it was going to come out. Put it on the next setting until it was on the same setting that a bucking horse would be on. And then once the body was starting to kind of break in, I would go stick it on a saddle horse and have somebody lead me around the arena and hold my feet, work on drag, work on my lift. And then that's how I would check that there. And also put it on the spur board. And if it feels like your hand's moving and on the spur board, I would do some tweak into the handle or the block or my shims or whatever and get it where I knew I could trust it. Then, only then, once I knew I could trust my equipment, would I go throw it on the back of a bucking horse. But we got her done. Got her all set up. Got the Latigos on, rigging pad on, nut pad on, strap in the front, handles all ground down, polyurethaned. Got her spacers in, got her block in with leather on top. Everything's to the tolerances and specs that I like. So that's what you guys do to set up a rigging. Takes a little bit of time, gotta have a little bit of tools. I think when I went and bought the epoxies and the nuts and bolts and everything, you're looking at anywhere from 20 bucks to 50 bucks if you don't have anything. You can get by with pretty minimalist tools. You don't need a lot of big power drills. You can use this, run the screws in by hand. The only thing that you probably will need some power tools is for the deck screw going in the front, combining the handle to the rigging. But I hope this video helps you guys. If you like it, please hit the like and subscribe button. Tell a friend or a fellow bareback rider about the video, and please help spread the word. Trying to help out a bunch of bareback riders so that at least they have a good foundation or basic of a little bit, basic knowledge, so that when they go crawling on a bucking horse, they're not going to be second guessing themselves. So yeah, I think that's really about it. If you think of any other video ideas or anything, hit me up in the comments section. I'll do my best to respond to you guys. One final caveat I was going to say is that if you see something else that another guy's done, or a way that a guy sets up his block, if he puts a different pad on his rigging, if he grinds his handle a different way, if he puts a strap on the front of his rigging a different way and you like it, implement it. Be a student of the game. So I'm just trying to show you how I set up my gear when I was rodeoing, and I hope it helps you guys out. So go out and create your own tradition, guys. I'll see you on the next video.